I'm going to guess 2 to 3 years from now, we're going to get a whole set of public standards on ontologies, agent harnesses, and a whole bunch of other stuff that will make it so that you can actually write an agent that'll talk to an Azure, GCP, AWS, Salesforce, Oracle, whatever you want, IBM, so that you'll have a standard way of interacting with all these different systems. And if there's an agent inside that system, like an Azure agent or a Salesforce agent, that there'll be a way to just call that agent. But the downside is now your ontologies and your kind of guardrails have to be consistent across all these systems.
Welcome to Practical AI, everybody. My name's Jeff. I'm here with Peter Lin. Practical AI is brought to you by Pocket AI.
Pocket AI is a visualization tool that allows you to prune your models without any loss in accuracy. Visualizing your model weights is like a brain surgeon being able to find individual neurons and removing them without harm to the brain. Similarly, Pocket AI allows you to analyze and prune the weights in your model. Using Pocket AI, we have proven we can select the right backbone model, get that model to actually work, make that model more stable, increase a model's accuracy, decrease the size of a model by up to 60%, and put smaller models into production for half the cost. Finally, you can be done with endless brute force training and new model trials. Pocket AI allows you to perform brain surgery on your existing models, making them not only smaller, but better.
Peter, today we want to talk a little bit about Salesforce, Agentforce, Salesforce. Tell us a little bit about Salesforce and what its AI platform does.
Yeah, so Salesforce it's been out for a long time. It's kind of a customer relational management thing where it manages your sales data and kind of your sales pipeline. And so it's really popular, and it's pretty, successful business. And their system allows you to kind of put in your sales data, check it, report it, making sure that everything you need to know about sales is there. And you can manage your customer relationship. You can manage, a whole bunch of stuff. And so about 10 years ago, they started buying out AI companies. The CEO, Mark, went on this buying spree. He bought out like over 10 AI companies. And then he dumped all of that once LLMs became popular, and they built this thing called Agentforce, which is just kind of a LLM-based solution. And they built agents, and it's called Einstein. And then it was rebranded to Agentforce. And the idea is that you would have agents to do things for you, but the downside is people aren't actually using it. And the revenue from that group is kind of small.
Yeah, so this Agentforce sort of hit the wire probably 2 years ago, pretty heavy. And there's a lot of promise to it, but this is also the same 6-month window when agents kind of became all the talk. Why hasn't Agentforce worked as well as it should for a company that's as dominant as Salesforce?
It has to do with the fact that LLMs are not deterministic, and building a really good agent means you have to have all the right pieces, right architecture. You need to have the right harness, you have the right validation, so that the inputs and outputs are validated before it goes to the next thing. So when you feed some input into LLM, it's going to do its thing. It'll spit out something. That thing that it spits out, if it's a command, if it's something that some program has to execute, you need to validate that before you actually run it. Because if you don't, you get things like, like the lady at Meta she told her agent to manage her inbox, and it ended up deleting her entire inbox, right? So whatever the LM outputs, you need to make sure that whatever it outputs, that is actually valid, so that you don't do something crazy that it shouldn't do, right? So
but
Salesforce is struggling.
So what is it about Salesforce that in that department?
Well, this stuff is all moving very fast. So they built the systems that's not reliable, that's not producing consistent results.
One of the things I've heard from customers too is that if you essentially Agentforce, you could be argued is a little bit of a harness, right, inside of its little universe, but it doesn't go outside of its universe, right? So if you're trying to run an agent that does something with QuickBooks data, for example, it's not going to be able to do that.
Yep. Yeah. So the risk of using just one company's agent is that you're now in their walled garden. And if you want to integrate with something outside of it, one, how hard is it going to be? And two, is it even possible? And three, if it's not easy and it's a real pain, do you then spin up your own agent? Now the question is, how do you then use your agent to integrate all these other platforms?
Okay, so let me ask you a question. If you had a lot of stuff going in Salesforce, because they do, they have Financial Force and they've got all these other modules, so you can actually run quite a bit of your business on Salesforce. Let's say you're really, really into it and your company runs on Salesforce. Would you consider doing all of your agents inside of Salesforce, so using Agentforce? Would you do everything outside? If you're building agents, would you build it outside of Agentforce, or would you have some sort of combination of the two?
For me, I would not build inside of Salesforce, just because, one, they're probably going to change things quickly to make it more successful, because right now, obviously, it's not. So if you build your system on the current platform, there's a high risk that it's going to break. Whereas if you just built your agent system outside of Salesforce, and then just use REST APIs to make calls into Salesforce, that is safer, because then you're just getting data from Salesforce. You're not relying on any components, any software services that they've built.
Talk a little bit about the whole idea of system of record, ontologies, because I think one of the things that, companies like Salesforce are in trouble partially because people believe that they can write their own software, right? So I don't need Salesforce if I can use an agent to write Salesforce, basically. So why am I paying this license? But Jensen over at NVIDIA says that, oh, no. These companies, Microsoft, Salesforce, ServiceNow, they're going to be fine because basically they have all of the system of record. Explain how the interaction between systems is going to work, and how much value can they retain or will they have as a system of record? And how hard is it to communicate if you're leveraging agents across these platforms?
Yeah, I think ultimately the industry will standardize on a set of agent protocols. So last year, the hot thing was MCP, right? So now this year, the hot thing is ontology. So eventually we're going to guess 2 to 3 years from now, we're going to get a whole set of public standards on ontologies, agent harnesses, and a whole bunch of other stuff that will make it so that you can actually write an agent that'll talk to an Azure, GCP, AWS, Salesforce, Oracle, whatever you want, IBM, so that you'll have a standard way of interacting with all these different systems. And if there's an agent inside that system, like an Azure agent or a Salesforce agent, that there'll be a way to just call that agent. But the downside is now your ontologies and your kind of guardrails have to be consistent across all these systems. And so at some point, everyone's going to have to standardize on OWL, because right now, Microsoft doesn't, Databricks doesn't. And so most of the companies that are kind of building ontologies aren't following the official W3C standard. So eventually people will have to standardize on that.
And give us the poor man's definition of an ontology one more time, just so we can...
So an ontology is really trying to capture what reality is. So it's what are the things in the world? How do they work, right? So ontology is just a formal way of describing the world, such that, for example, if you have, the classic example is genus and phylum, kind of the evolutional tree of there's mammals. What defines a mammal? What defines a tree? What defines this? And so you have classes of genus and phylum, and then underneath that you have the specific, species. And so in business terms, you have customer. Customer is a person, maybe, or you call it a customer entity, right? So maybe if you're in healthcare, you've got a person, but a person could be a doctor, it could be a subscriber, it could be something else. And so now you have to model these things in such a way that a doctor prescribes prescriptions to a patient, and a patient gets subscriptions, but a patient is also someone that has healthcare, that has health coverage. A patient also has medical records. And so there's all these things that you have to describe so that an agent knows, okay, well, this is how I use this data. Because if it doesn't have that explained explicitly, then it can't figure out what it can do and how it should use it.
So an ontology is essentially a naming convention with a defined definitions underneath it.
It's more than that. It has to be a well-defined structure of the entities and the relationships, right?
Okay.
So and some things, for example, every child has to have only two parents, a mother and a father, because that's what you need to produce a human, right? And so you can do things like, if I say Bob is Mary's father and Mary is Jane's mother, then you can, from that data, that ontology, you can go, oh, well, so that's Bob's the grandfather and Jane is the granddaughter, right? And so you need to find things in a way that your rules and your system and your agents can reason over how to use the data. Because if you don't do that, the agent will either hallucinate and do the wrong thing, or two, it can't do anything at all.
And I think Palantir has basically built an entire, mega company off of ontologies and basically figuring out how to speak this language into specific use cases, not to mention that they have software and stuff that does stuff. But back to Salesforce, just let's wrap this up. What happens to a company like Salesforce? Are they going to survive because they've got this sort of system of record thing figured out? Or
I think they're probably okay. They'll have to fire people and change their direction. I mean, ultimately, they're probably going to have to trim a lot of fat from their AI group and kind of rebuild, because from what people are saying, the Agentforce is not really predictable and reliable. And that's the last thing you want in a enterprise customer relationship management system where things are not predictable and reliable.
yeah, well, and what I my takeaway is that you wouldn't build agents in Agentforce as much as you would build your harness and your agents outside of it, and that's probably not what Mark Benioff wants people to hear at this point.
No.
All right. Well, good
No.
talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, good talk. We'll pick up more of the software stuff because the software conversation is very, very interesting right now. But remember, we are on Spotify if you want to find us there and just listen to us. If you have any ideas or questions, be sure to ask them, and we will take any recommendations on topics as well. Peter, thanks for the discussion, and we will talk to the rest of you later. Thanks.